Hello, it's Brad Laurie, or BlockchainBrad, and today I'm speaking on behalf of BlockVera. It's all about truth, trust, and transparency on the blockchain and beyond. And today we're speaking all about Vite, French for fast. This is an update specifically from the source. We are speaking with Richard Yan. He is one of the founders of Vite. Thank you very much for your time today, Richard.
Thank you, Brad, for having me on. It's always an honor.
Not a problem, Richard. Always a pleasure to have you on. And you're back in the office right now, busy at work. Let's get into the business of the day, though, speaking about the recaps and all the updates for Vite. French for fast, as I said, high-performance decentralized ecosystem. What's happening of late? What's the number one thing that you wanted to address to let people know what's happening with regard to your development?
Yeah, so things are going really well. I guess you can say the pace of development at Vite is quite Vite. It's a bit of a cliche around here. But I think the biggest update we have for people is that our mainnet will launch in Q3 of this year, which is imminent. And to prove the speed and free transaction cost, which are the most important two qualities for the Vite chain, we are releasing our own decentralized exchange. And that's scheduled to be released July 30th, so mark your calendar.
Okay.
The most important...
Your own, just to interrupt there, let's talk about that a bit more.
Sure.
Now, having your own decentralized exchange, that's a significant update in itself happening this month. So why did you decide to do that on your own? Why not just, sync with some other DEX?
Well, so the basic idea here is that our decentralized exchange is based on our own technology, the Vite chain. So the Vite chain is known for being free and for having fast transactions. Our efficiency is basically produced by the asynchronous architecture, and the fastness or the speed comes from low latency, which is basically being done through the snapshot chain, which is a unique technology that we produced.
Right, and we are going to talk more on those aspects of your tech again, rehash the DAG and look at the snapshot as well. But what was interesting is that you're saying that because of your unique tech, the asynchronous aspects, that it melded better with your own, or it made more sense to have your own DEX to suit the needs.
That's right. So, I mean, interoperability between decentralized exchanges is always a tricky topic. The thing is that our decentralized exchange is based on our own technology. So, in that sense, it's by itself. Now, that being said, we are opening our DEX in two different ways. Number one is that we're inviting others to join as a DEX operator. And what that means is that as a DEX operator, you can have your trading zone on the DEX, you can list coins, and you can benefit from the trading fees associated with trading those coins. So for example, if I'm, let's say, NEO, and I want to become a trading zone operator on the ViteX, I would apply to become such an operator. I would set up a gateway, and for any coins that are not currently on the Vite chain, I would basically be collecting those coins onto my gateway and subsequently mint new coins on the Vite chain as representation of those coins, and then set up a trading pair on the exchange, and then benefit afterwards the trading fees associated with any transactions associated with that trading pair.
Right.
So that's number one. Number two is that our DEX is completely open source. So if anyone wants to fork this, like if another centralized exchange, for example, wants to enter into the DEX zone to basically provide new kind of product offering to their customers, or to just become more decentralized, we're more than happy to share this code with them. It's open source, so they can do whatever they want with it.
Well, let's talk about that, because obviously you're very confident. You've now been in the space for some time, well over a year, Richard, building this out, your own blockchain, your own DAG system, your own platform. Now, given that you're offering the DEX code out, in this open source fashion, are you concerned at all about the challenges inherent with appropriation, with using your code to build out another DEX, or are you simply confident because you've had one of those first market moves into the space?
Yeah, I think you can think of this more or less as the Linux model, right? So Linux is completely free and open source, and anyone can just fork that code, if you will, and then use it. But ultimately, the people that invent this code know it the best. And then we'll ultimately also have ways where the Vite coin will still have value if others were to fork our code. I think, so number one is that there's a reputation premium, right, assigned to the Vite coin itself if someone else were to fork our chain. So I think you could argue that we're not capturing the full value when someone else copies our code, but you could also argue that we are benefiting in the sense that it's a good problem to have when a lot of people are validating your product by taking advantage of it.
You raise a really good point there. So there is genuine advantages for the potential of the forking the code if that should happen in the future for Vite, as an entity itself. So how's that going with regard to the current situation where other entities may be adopting the code, maybe forking and utilizing what you've built?
Yeah, so this is sort of in the works, but DEX is our #1 priority. But after that gets launched and then we acquire customers and the dust sort of settles there, we're looking forward to something called Vite 2.0. And that is a world where we imagine where instead of having many dApps on one chain, we'll have one dApp per chain. So what I'm referring to is the fact that as we talk to more and more people or entities that want to collaborate with Vite, we realize that many people want to have their own public blockchain specifically dedicated to the application that they want to do. For example, a centralized exchange approached us, and they basically want to fork the Vite chain and basically create their own chain specifically for their own decentralized exchange. And we're very happy that they approached us. We showed them what we have. They're very impressed with the fact that it's free and fast. And so we're preparing ourselves for Vite 2.0, where we will have a Cosmos-style interoperability chain at the very top, and then various public blockchains will be derivatives of it. But ultimately, the assets on these different chains will be exchangeable on-chain. Right now, an asset on the Ethereum chain and an asset on Bitcoin chain cannot be exchanged very easily because, or at least cannot be exchanged on an on-chain manner because that's just the way it is. But if you have a Cosmos setup and you have these sub-chains basically set up in the same architecture, then cross-chain asset transfer can be truly done in a decentralized manner. And that's where things are going, and that's what we're preparing for.
That's a big deal, and I want to interrupt, if that's okay, and sort of expand on this point, because you're building almost a multi-chain facility, a capacity to interact with multiple blockchains, as you said. Cosmos is obviously very integral to the stack. So can we pull it back a bit, talk a bit about Cosmos, the connection with Vite, why you chose them, perhaps in your approach, and then what kind of blockchains are you thinking, Richard, with regard to that interoperability, that multi-chain approach?
Yeah, so let me just clarify one thing. We're not actually choosing them. I think we're learning after them in the sense that Cosmos now is this master chain that facilitates easy on-chain, cross-chain transfer with other chains basically taking what Cosmos has built and essentially forking their code, right? This is basically what, for example, Binance has done with the BNB chain. There are a few other exchanges that have also forked the Cosmos chain. And we're basically foreseeing Vite 2.0 as being another Cosmos. But in our case, every new chain would benefit from the existing free and fast blockchain characteristics that are inherent to Vite.
Right, so free, fast, for the people through the open source. And let's talk about, Richard, the blockchains that you're already considering. Obviously, you stand for quality, not just being fast. So you obviously want to interoperate or work with and synchronize with similarly respected and reputable blockchains.
Right. So the Vite 2.0 is currently still being designed. And then I think after we release some documentation about it, then we'll start finding partners that will want to use it. Right now, there are, I would say, 1 or 2 other partners that have already expressed their interest, and that's what piqued our intention in terms of creating it. But in terms of rolling out new things, though, I feel compelled to also talk about this other coin that's associated with our DEX. Our DEX is called ViteX, and there's a coin associated with it called VX. And what's unique about this coin is that the way to earn this coin is that you basically trade on our exchange. So there's no pre-mining, there's no ICO, there's no pre-sale, none of that. The way it works is that there are 5 different methods in which you can obtain this. But the most important one is trading on this exchange. So the minute you do a trade, you are rewarded a certain amount of VX.
Right.
Then there are a few other ways. You can also list a trading pair to get VX. You can also stake your Vite for the benefit of the smart contract that runs this DEX in order to retrieve VX. You can also refer the exchange to others to retrieve VX. You can also make markets on the exchange in order to retrieve VX. And basically, VX will be released on the 2-year schedule, and a small percentage of the VX will that's mined through this process will go to the development team, but only a very small percentage. So most of these coins will be obtained completely in a completely decentralized manner to anyone willing to participate on our exchange.
And this is a big development with ViteX, because obviously it's designed to incentivize the entire ecosystem, really bolster what you've already built. But basically, as you mentioned, no pre-sale, no ICO, no IEO, no IXO.
Correct.
Basically, it's that pure incentivization.
There's no sale wall. There's no huge sell wall waiting there, right, for people to acquire it and sell it.
Right.
So all you have. So the true. The most likely people will be getting this VX through just trading on the exchange. And in fact, this exchange already has a test link. It's publicly beta tested available. So maybe I can supply it to you. You can put it in your show notes.
Yes, that'd be great. Right. Well, let's talk about the terminology for a moment, because obviously Vite itself is a utility token. It certainly is the fuel or the gas for your whole ecosystem. Now with VX, how would you determine that? Is that essentially designed to be an incentivization, rewards-based token, again, to fuel your economy and support it? Or does it also fit in somehow as a utility?
Yeah, so this one is slightly tricky, and that's why we plan to do some kind of geofence for countries where the regulation is more sensitive about this. After all, this is an exchange. So with VX, the main benefit from it is, aside from people thinking the value of VX will rise over time, one major benefit is that they will share in the trading fees generated by the exchange, right? So every time you perform a trade on an exchange, there is, you have to remit some kind of trading fee. So the exchange aggregates the trading fee pool and distributes on a daily basis to all the VX holders, right? So that's ultimately where the value of the VX lies. So basically, my explanation sort of closes the loop. Right. You obtain VX by trading on it or via these 4 other methods. And then after you hold the VX, you obtain trading fees as a result, as a benefit of being a VX holder.
Sure, it makes a lot of sense, Richard. Now, with VX, I wanted to ask you, what's the correlation of value between VX and Vite? Because no doubt Vite holders of the utility token would be benefiting, I would imagine, from not only you having a DEX, but you having VX as well.
Yes, absolutely. That's a great question. So Vite is the underlying infrastructure for the DEX. So any kind of faith or belief in VX is grounded in some kind of understanding of how Vite will function, right?
Right.
So if Vite truly is fast and free, then the user experience on this decentralized exchange will be very, very similar to centralized exchanges out there, which has yet to be done very well. And so I think the correlation between Vite and VX will be significant. There's also a coin discovery element, right? So some people might not know about Vite or understand its benefits right now, but the DEX itself will be a prime example of, it will be a huge dApp, right? It will be a good use case that proves out the value of the Vite chain.
Right, and I think you raise a very important point there.
And then finding Vite and vice versa. So I think the value of the two will be very highly correlated.
Right, and I think you raise a really good point there as well, Richard, with regard to use case, because the DEX itself is a prime use case for Vite's ecosystem. And no doubt, essentially with you being your own full and replete system in itself, built with the DAG, that not only is there a correlation, but I would argue that Vite itself, as the token built as the underlying infrastructure, is essential for your DEX. You couldn't have DEX without Vite.
Yes, that's absolutely true. And by the way, one thing worth pointing out is that the BNB DEX, the Binance DEX, has been sort of making waves. But one thing people might not be aware of is that every time you make an order, whether it executes or not, you get charged some fee. So even if you cancel an order, right? The order by construction will never go through. You're charged some fee because that is the way the economic model of the underlying chain. That's just how it works. But the economic model of Vite, the underlying chain for ViteX, does not do that. You only have to stake a certain amount of Vite in order to make a transaction. So in theory, it's kind of like buying a property instead of renting a property. With renting a property, your rent is just thrown away. But buying a property, you buy it, but then the value still is there. The value preservation mechanism is fully there. So you buy some Vite, stake it, do some transactions, and afterwards you don't want Vite anymore, you can just sell it. It's basically free.
Well, that's a really interesting point, given that you raised BNB and we're discussing Binance. Do you think they're concerned at all about, this kind of competition, because you're obviously one-upping them with regard to the fees?
Yeah. So like at the end of the day, we want to improve upon the status quo, right? And basically one of our competition. So in that sense, definitely. But I think the pie is large enough for everybody. And there's also, I'm sure Binance is improving their technologies as we speak. So I don't know, if only they had discovered Vite earlier and they, we were happy for them to fork us.
Right. Well, let's see what happens in the future, Richard. There's a long future ahead for cryptocurrency, for blockchain, for DAG technology, DLT. It will be interesting to see how it plays out even in the DEX space. But let's move it back a bit to some of your tech assets. We alluded to the DAG before. Can we talk a bit about the value of asynchronous structures? Because the DAG, yours particularly, is that way. Why does that matter so much when we're talking about DLT for today?
So we think the way we position ourselves is that we didn't invent the blockchain, but similarly to Henry Ford, right? He didn't invent the car, but he was able to get cars to be mass adopted after he streamlined the assembly line. So we basically made tweaks to the blockchain in two different ways. Number one is cost. Number two is efficiency. So cost basically comes from the fact that the asynchronous architecture that you mentioned, which has many different components. There's the DAG ledger structure. There's the asynchronous transaction sending. Basically, every transaction is divided into two pieces, the invocation and the execution. And then there's also our Solidity++ language is also an asynchronous language. So basically, there are many different pieces, components of our technology that effectively try to improve improve the throughput of the system, which effectively lowers the cost.
Right.
That's the first component. And the second part is efficiency. And when I talk about efficiency, I'm really referring to latency. And the latency has to do with the decoupling of verification and confirmation, which is done by the snapshot chain in our system.
Okay. Now, with regard to asynchronous, though, obviously the way in which it operates allows for isolated sort of components of your whole ecosystem to work without having to rely on other parts. That's the whole point of it. So do you want to talk to us a bit about the value of the term asynchronous when it's embedded into your structure, so people are aware, when we compare it to synchronous systems?
Right. So I think the best way to understand this is that when something needs to be done, there are multiple steps involved. But if you insist that step A, step B, step C happen in sequence in that order, then you basically have to wait for these steps to be completely over before you can do more things. And with asynchronous, what you do is you do step A, and then you don't have to wait for step B and step C to complete before you move on and do something else.
Right.
So it's kind of like how emails are an asynchronous system, right? So if I imagine that I can't send an email until I hear back from you, then that would really prevent me from being efficient in my productivity in terms of email writing, right? Whereas with asynchronous system, I can send you an email. Before you reply, I can go on, do some other things or write another email. And then when you reply to me, I can get on with it.
Right.
So our system is sort of like that with the various components that basically exhibit asynchronous architecture.
Got it. So time and ordering, essentially, you're really changing the game. So you're not precluded by the order of events, and certainly with regard to time, again, being asynchronous, you're not precluded by what I do as for example, in that analogy, the email, when we use it as. So that obviously in itself is an advantage for efficiency, cost saving. The list goes on.
Right. It's a complicated system. So like the directed acyclic graph or DAG. And then the fact that we basically decouple transactions into two pieces, the sending and the receiving, and the fact that our Solidity++ language supports asynchronous programming, like all these things are intertwined to deliver this asynchronous system.
Right.
So it's quite complicated.
And what was interesting when we last spoke, and prior to that, we talked about we questioned whether or not it was a value add to have a very unique Solidity++ language, extending upon Ethereum's own developer programming language. And obviously, This is to do with the asynchronous model that you've built.
That's correct. So to build an asynchronous language, we had to start from something. We decided to start with Solidity just because that's the most widely adopted programming language in the crypto circle. So this way, there's not much learning curve when you go from Solidity to Solidity++.
Right. Now, given now that since we've spoken last, given how we've seen Ethereum flourish, a significant number of developers now, are you glad you made that choice to develop upon?
I think so. In fact, a number of dApps have already been launched on our platform. So first of all, there are a number of games. If you download our wallet, you can see almost 10 games right now of all different types. And they're all based on they're all taking advantage of our development platform. Mm-hmm. We also have started a partnership with the city of Syracuse in upstate New York in the United States. So the city is trying to tokenize a donation program. And let me quickly explain what that means. So American cities are trying to help its low-income residents in housing problems. So they traditionally raise money through some kind of donation platform. We came in and we said, let's tokenize this. So what does that mean? Number one is that donors, after they donate a certain amount of money, get tokens in return, which they can use to claim services and goods within city bounds, right? So this basically helps trap liquidity within local economy. And also the donors are more incentivized to donate now that they have something back, right? Aside from just feeling good about having helped someone else.
Right.
So that's one thing. The second thing we're doing is that the funds being distributed to the landlords, right? Which is basically what the donation pool is traditionally used for, right? You send a security deposit check to a landlord on behalf of a tenant, or you send a bridge rent for someone that's behind on their rent. So now instead of doing that, we send a coin to the landlord, and the landlord needs to basically redeem the fiat, right? Similar to how you do redemption on a stable coin through the city government. And the reason why we do that is that we wanted to make sure that these are not slumlords. These are not people that are just taking advantage of low-income folks and providing terrible housing conditions. And by basically introducing this additional step, the government can come in and make sure that various requirements have been met for the housing program.
Right, so there's government oversight with the initiative with Syracuse partnered with you. Richard, right. That's a big deal. We've spoken about the Syracuse partnership before. This is a pilot program, no doubt. It's benevolent by design in many ways because it's really opening up the potential of tokenized systems to integrate with modern mainstream economies. So surely this is a showcase for what other governments could do.
It is. So aside from this city, we're also talking to town of Berkeley, which is where University of California, Berkeley is. We're also talking to the state of Rhode Island. So the city of Berkeley is looking to launch something called a microbond, right? So microbond itself has no blockchain element in it, but they're trying to issue the microbond on a blockchain. So this way, the fundraising process will gain some transparency. And there's also this existing exchange mechanism out there for people to trade in and out of their tokens after they acquire the microbond. The state of Rhode Island, right, is very active in terms of exploring blockchain solutions, right? And we think that our platform is sufficiently mature, and what we're doing with Syracuse could be an easy model to be exported to Rhode Island. So we're talking to them as well.
Right.
We recently also had onboarded a business development manager in Ivory Coast. So he'll be looking into doing BD for us in Africa. We're also talking to someone in Manhattan who used to work with the city government there. So hopefully we can basically do horizontally scale out this kind of public chain for public good model.
Yes, and I suspect that's going to happen. Even since we last spoke, you've really expanded that model beyond Syracuse, just in a matter of months. So expanding beyond the borders of your own country, for example, beyond US, given that, the initiative started there for Vite, do you envisage that that's likely to happen within the next, let's say, year to 2 years? Is the part of the roadmap to really start to discuss with other countries, even with the governments of, let's say, Australia, let's say Asia, let's talk about Europe. There's so many progressive countries now that are pro DLT and blockchain. Surely there's potential beyond the borders of the states you're working with.
Yes, absolutely. So we're doing two things. Number one is we are, for the existing partnerships, we're pushing things forward. We already have an app that's in public testing mode, and I'm happy to show that to you at some point. In fact, I might be able to do it after this. But,
yeah, that'd be great, and I'll try and show a piece of it if we can.
Yeah. And then, so at the same time, we are beginning these conversations with Berkeley, state of Rhode Island, African countries, and also the city of Manhattan in New York. But public chain for public good is one of these things we're doing. We're also exploring DeFi, decentralized finance. I come from a Wall Street background, so I'm very fascinated with what's happening in that space. I think there's a lot to be done. The main ethos of DeFi is basically financial applications without the middleman, right? Without the intermediary. Right. And we're already seeing lots of interesting use cases out there, but I think the space is so vast and room for imagination is huge. Aside from this, we also have this idea for tokenizing e-commerce platforms. So eBay coin, Amazon coin, Etsy coin, similar to the city of Syracuse. These coins basically are purchased in one batch, and then the liquidity of these coins is trapped within the system. You can only spend these coins on Etsy things or Amazon things. And this can all be done on our public chain platform. But so all of that are just use cases that we're exploring.
And they are certainly exciting. I wanted to just touch on the comment you made about e-commerce, because right now, as you're very much aware, the Libra hearings have just concluded or still ongoing, I'm not sure, but a lot of discussions about the potentials of e-commerce. As you mentioned with DeFi, the potentials are sort of interconnected there. Now, on that point, the potential for Vite to engage in e-commerce is also substantial, given that you have serious products and services that you're thinking of. Is that something that excites you as well with what Vite's going to do?
Yeah, so we already have a store set up, global.vite.store. I encourage people to try it out. I'll probably send it to you. I can show it in the show notes.
Sure.
And this is basically a place where people can buy Vite swags. And we're happy to sponsor your merch on there as well. But ultimately, people can purchase with currencies issued on the Vite chain, right? So the way it works is that similar to any e-commerce platform, you select your product, put it in a shopping bag or a shopping cart, select checkout, then a QR code pops up. You use your smartphone, open up your Vite wallet, scan it, and boom, the payment comes in, and then the order is through. Right. So we have also modularized the payment system there. So presumably anyone trying to sell anything on any website can basically put that piece of code on their website, and then someone can check out their ads, their products with Vite-based currencies.
Right. So why, in that respect, you really are focused on blockchain business, the potentials of DLT, essentially to really enable people to interact, to have a token that represents true value that can be exchanged for digital assets or even for real world assets. Points of purchase.
Fundamentally, Vite is a free and fast public blockchain, right? So it's like the internet's basic highway infrastructure. On top of that, we are exploring, we have a multi-chain wallet. We have a decentralized exchange. We're doing payment, which is also tied into e-commerce. And we're doing public chain for public good, which is what I talked about with Syracuse, Berkeley, Africa, and so forth. Right. And then we're exploring things like DeFi and platform tokenization. So there are many, many things kind of growing out of this fertile ground that we already built as the public blockchain.
And I think that's a really exciting point, a good analogy in the way that you've described it as branches, because many people perhaps don't understand that really the blockchain is just the engine for all the things that you are building and planning on building in the future. And the scope, I would imagine, is really quite infinite in what you can do, and much of it may not even been explored in terms of the planning, and the roadmap for Vite in the near future.
Yeah, absolutely. So we're very excited about these other things that we'll be doing. For coming back to DeFi for 1 second, for example, that actually ties into our multi-chain wallet.
Mm-hmm.
So we're trying to basically make a mechanism, exploring a mechanism, such that any balance within the wallet can actually gain interest. So if you were to save your Vite or any Vite-based products on our wallet, and our wallet now supports all ERC20 and even supports Grin, which is notoriously hard to integrate with. But these assets on Vite wallet will be able to gain interest as you keep them in there. And there's instant liquidity, which means they're not locked in for you to receive that interest. It's not like a savings account with a 1-month lockup or 3-month lockup. You can basically receive interest real time and then withdraw your assets anytime you want.
That's a big deal, Richard, just that alone. Let's talk about that. So you can incentivize people to stake, and not just Vite, but all of these ERC20s. That's a huge number of different options there, just in that alone. Grin, another one.
Just to be very clear, it's not all ERC20. So there's different ways to implement this, but the way we're thinking about it is that we can basically partner up with an existing DeFi platform for ERC20, and the ERC20 coins can simply, the ERC20 coins supported by that DeFi platform can simply earn interest that way. So as big as these DeFi platforms have grown, they still have not been exposed to many people in the world. A lot of people still don't know about them, right, or aren't familiar with them. So us providing an interface would certainly help them capture a lot, acquire lots of customers. And then aside from that, there's also the staking element, which is slightly different. Within our wallet, there already is a function where you can basically vote for a certain snapshot block producer, which will give you the block reward in Vite, right? So basically, if you have Vite, you can earn Vite through voting, which is also staking, right? This is what people call staking as a service. If you don't have Vite, right, if you have ERC20, then for certain ERC20, you will be able to gain interest through our partnership with these DeFi platforms.
I see. So just to be clear, so I do need to make it clear that they are separated. So the staking's through the Vite, through the mechanisms, and that also bolsters your security. It is a fundamental sort of incentivized structure also that you built in.
Correct.
But then what is interesting is that you're really incentivizing DeFi as well, the businesses that it can engage, because you are compatible with ERC20 tokens.
That's correct. That's correct. We support all ERC20 tokens, and some ERC20 tokens can currently earn interest through various DeFi systems such as Compound, Dharma, and so on. And we're basically going to select 1 or 2 systems that we feel are reliable, have the smallest amount or no amount of smart contract risk, and basically incorporate that into our wallet and to benefit our users.
Okay.
You'll be surprised at the amount of information disconnect between these products that are more America-centric versus the rest of the world. So like, for example, there's this thing called kimchi premium in Korean exchanges. I don't know if you heard, but Bitcoin can trade at extremely high price.
Yes, I have heard about this.
Right, because of various reasons.
Right. And obviously, you're also integrating other ecosystems because of that. Now, Grin, you mentioned. I really wanted to ask why Grin? Now, what attracted you to their technology?
So one of our customer acquisition strategy, or getting people to discover Vite, is to find people is to basically acquire customers through our wallet, right? And one way to get people to use your wallet is if your wallet supports a rare or hard to integrate coin, right? So Grin, for example, they recently had a hard fork. And for whatever reason, the new version is not backward compatible with any existing wallet. So basically, for any kind of wallet to continue supporting Grin, they need to accommodate to the hard fork and basically upgrade their system in accordance. And that's not easy. Our engineers were able to do that, and we kept up. But initially, we picked Grin precisely for the fact that we think that it's a privacy coin with lots of use cases and potential users, and also loyal users with lots of miners. At the same time, it's also very difficult to integrate because of the way Grin works, right? Like, Grin doesn't have addresses similar to the way you would understand a Vite address or ERC20 address. It's got this totally different mechanism in order to preserve privacy for its users. And then we basically had to completely rethink how we integrate with it, and it was a lot of work. But I think it was worth it because I'm constantly told by friends or just people coming up to me saying that they like the Grin feature of Vite Wallet, and that's how they learn more about Vite.
Right. It also gives people a gateway into the Grin ecosystem through the work you've done, the due diligence you did, the coding, the engineering. So surely Grin must be very happy that you've invested
Very
that time and
appreciative.
support.
Yeah. You think so?
Yeah, you would think so.
I mean, Grin is different, right? So they don't really have a company behind it. It's very decentralized, which is
It
also
is.
what's sexy about it.
Mm.
So I think they recently hired their third or fourth developer, and someone made a donation in the amount of 300 ETH to their foundation, which is great. But we go to their community, their forums, and we
Right. And
talk
it's
about
interesting too, Richard, because it's almost reminiscent.
of our wallet.
Right, and it's interesting because it's reminiscent of Bitcoin's first iterations because it's quite organic. You know, it is authentically decentralized, but
Right.
no doubt they still
No
want to
ICO,
build out
no
no ICO,
pre-mining.
no
Right.
rubbish. You know, they're
Right.
straight.
Exactly.
They're
Right.
all
Sounds
about train.
familiar.
It does,
Yeah.
but what's exciting though, much like
Yeah.
you still have fundamental architects or key architects behind or evangelizing even the Bitcoin ecosystem. It's the same thing for Grin. So no doubt, from an engineering standpoint, those that are engaged in the Grin ecosystem to support it are really excited about this partnership or this support that you've afforded them.
I think so. Yeah. I think the best way to kind of gain exposure is sort of it's quid pro quo, right? You do something nice for the Grin community, and it's karma. I think that's probably the better way to put it.
Right.
Ultimately, you'll get benefited yourself as well.
Exactly. Now, obviously, we've talked about key things like your Vite store, your Vite, the VX. It's a really exciting progression. What about Block Explorer? Are there any updates on that? Because that's a key aspect of your model as well.
Yeah. So our Block Explorer has always been the I guess the website where all the transactions are being tracked. So from that perspective, that has not changed much. It is possible we might make it a slightly more user-friendly when it comes to the SyraCoin app, SyraCoin being the Syracuse Coin app. So currently, if you were in Syracuse and you want to spend this coupon coin that you've obtained from making a donation, right? And you want to track where this coin has been, you open up the Block Explorer. Right now, it just shows you like a sending transaction, a receiving transaction, because it's DAG-based. It's actually very complex. It's hard to understand what's going on.
Mm-hmm.
So we might look to modify that slightly to be more user-friendly.
Right.
But otherwise, the core functionality of Block Explorer will stay that way.
Got it. So you're on track with that. Now, usability itself, I want to talk about some of the evidence more so beyond the tech, things like naming services, contract scheduling, contract upgrades. How is everything going with regard to evidencing the real usability of the whole ecosystem and the chain?
Right. Yeah, these are features mentioned in our white paper that will be implemented according to plan gradually. Right now, our main focus is on the decentralized exchange. Like, believe it or not, it sucks in a lot of engineering and operating effort. So I think that is taking up a majority of our resources at the moment. And besides that, obviously, all these GovCoin partnerships, our mainnet launch, and all these other use cases we're exploring. So those other features will be implemented. It's just not right now.
I see. So in your roadmap, you're just really being quite strategic. Right now, you're looking at the best value add for the ecosystem, focusing on that, building that. And I think that many people who support Vite from the outset would, find that appealing because you want to do things properly and well as you build.
Yes, absolutely. Yeah. I think we're fully transparent with what we're trying to do at every step in the roadmap published on our website.
Mm-hmm.
And our number one goal right now is to deliver on our promise of mainnet and DEX in third quarter. In fact, with DEX launching July 30th.
Okay, so July 30 is the DEX. Now, mainnet, I really want to talk to you about that, and also dApps as well, and get an update on specifics with regard to applications that are now onboarding. So how's that roadmap in terms of that aspect of development?
Yeah, so on our wallet, there are currently 10 different games, and they're all built around they're basically dApps on the Vite chain. We have put together a Q&A for people that want to develop and deploy on our chain. So that should be, I'll send you the link and perhaps put it on the show notes.
Mm.
And so, I mean, we're there's overwhelming interest, to be honest, in terms of developing apps and getting them featured in our wallet. In fact, there are some we have to turn down for various reasons. Some are not purely decentralized apps, right? Some have custody to customers' funds, which we feel might not be the safest way to go. And there are other reasons that are not blockchain related, where we felt that certain apps weren't the best fit. But ultimately, the amount of interest in developing and listing their app on our wallet is huge.
So with regard to the pipeline,
and then in terms of in terms of growth, the number of block producers has also really blossomed. We have almost 50 block producers, or aka supernodes, for our chain all around the world. We have a ton in Europe, quite a few in Russia, and some in Southeast Asia, and obviously quite a few in China as well.
Right. Well, that increase in block producers is obviously going to increase the security and also just the sheer trust in the decentralization of this. But moving back again to the dApps, I want to ask you about the pipeline itself. You mentioned 10, and it's been a while, but are there more in the works? Are there more that you're currently aware of that will onboard, as we move to Q3, Q4 and beyond?
Right. So there are a few. Number one, the DEX is a huge heavyweight one. It's the most complex and probably will be the most frequently used app based on the Vite chain. We think there might be others that want to fork our code on the DEX and build their own DEX, right? So that will basically do a copy and paste into new dApps. There will definitely be more games. We're also envisioning these DeFi, right? So I call it DeFi. But so there might be like Vite in terms of interest-bearing functions within our wallet, but you could also organically build a DeFi application just on the Vite chain itself. And then obviously the GovCoin, these are all dApps. We already have a dApp in the form of SyraCoin that's available for public testing. Happy to send you a link for that as well.
Yes, that'd be great. And also in terms of accessibility, now that you have the app for the GovCoin, is it something that you are pitching in the enterprise sector? I want to talk about that for a moment with parties throughout the US, for example, even beyond that, Canada, or, again, alluding to the rest of the world. Are you really pitching the value of this so people can understand that they could literally use this to benefit their own economies?
Yes. So I think the most immediate enterprises that would be interested would be other exchanges that want to use our DEX protocol, right? So, or not DEX protocol, our DEX system based on the Vite chain or Vite protocol. So those would be one kind of enterprises. The second kind of enterprises really are the government entities or government agencies. We think there's a vacuum in that space, and we intend to fill it. In terms of just pure corporate entities, we feel that space actually has been sort of somewhat saturated. So we're more waiting for like inbound requests rather than doing active outbounds. We feel that our conversion rate is a little bit better in that sense.
Right. Okay. Well, it'll be good to see the GovCoin initiative roll out more. I imagine it will. But right now, as you said, the DEX is really the key point with regard to the potential of enterprise. Now, mobility is another thing I want to talk to you about. We talk about apps now. We talk about DEX. One of the key assets for many prominent startups is for other regions, perhaps that aren't as advantaged as those in the US or in Australia where I am, to be able to access apps. How easy are you making it for those parties around the world to engage, to access Vite?
So I think one way we could be helpful to the unbanked, right, or people living in hyperinflation countries is actually we're on the cusp of integrating with a stablecoin project. And after that stablecoin project is issued on Vite, we'll have a native stablecoin, and we'll basically have access to fiat on-ramp and crypto off-ramp. And essentially, people in Venezuela, for example, are talking about access to Bitcoin being a huge boon, right, because of just unbearable amount of inflation in their fiat. So we're hoping that something like this stablecoin on Vite can be useful to them as well.
That's a huge deal because it stabilizes, it gives confidence to those parties of a stable, point of value, a unit of account. It creates a huge potential for e-commerce. You also have a huge, number of nodes now. I mean, you've almost got 1,500. So the decentralized aspect's even stronger there. So surely this kind of partnership you're alluding to with the stablecoin is going to be a big game changer, much like the DEX plan.
Yes, absolutely. So this is also why we hired our African business development manager, because lots of countries that have the issues I described happen to be in that continent. And I think it's very much underexplored, and
Mm.
we're hopeful that this person will be able to bring us good news.
Yes, I hope so too. Now, you're not going to tell us who this stablecoin is, are you?
Not right now. So we're still in the middle of integration. I think we'll be more ready to discuss it when they're ready to discuss it.
Right. Well, it's exciting to hear that that's another development. Just a quick update as well, Richard, on your team, your advisors, your community. How are you feeling about that with regard to continued growth, continued
Right. So
expansion?
we have 5 people in Silicon Valley office. We have 35 in Beijing office. Most of the people in Beijing are engineers. A small number are operating staff, and our community has really exploded. So we have 15 or plus community groups, basically covering every major language in the world. Spanish, Russian, Bengali, Thai, and so on. And one very important market we're trying to become more active in right now is actually South Korea.
Mm-hmm.
It is one of the most active markets for Bitcoin trading. The percentage of Korean citizens that trade crypto is extremely high compared to other countries, for whatever reason. And I also our CMO, Chief Marketing Officer, is a Korean, so we have that advantage. So this is something we're going to be paying particularly close attention to. We also got on Upbit, arguably the #1 Korean exchange a few months ago, by virtue of us getting on Bittrex.
Mm-hmm.
So it's certainly an extremely important resource that we'll look to tap into.
I'm so glad you mentioned that, because obviously there is often a connection between Bittrex, the US and regulated exchange, and Upbit in Korea. Often that's a huge, a huge positive or huge boon for any startup, because it provides more volume, more attention, more reach. Now, with regard to that, Richard, what's the plan for further exchanges? Obviously, they always decide, but teams have to obviously engage at some point.
Well, yeah, so we've been, at this point, we're only looking at top tier exchange. And by that, I mean maybe only 2 or 3 in the world. We've been approached by multiple exchanges to list. The problem is that the fees are quite high. We just, like, if you think about remitting a fee to the exchange, the main reason why you want to do that is that it's just that you're trying to acquire more customers, right? And that's kind of your entrance fee. For us, we'd rather deploy that fee towards R&D through business development for our various useful use cases, right? So
I'm so glad you mentioned that, because just recently, and I want to bring it back to that Libra hearing for a moment, there was one of the senators or one of the representatives mentioned the word shitcoin. They literally did on record. So I wanted to discuss it with you, because you're alluding to something that's not a shitcoin. We know that there are real legitimate, I call them legit coins, ones that are actually trying to do real stuff that's beyond just the narrative that BTC offers for the world, which is relevant in its own sense. Now, in your ecosystem, obviously the utility is clear. You're saying that these exchanges often have the choice, look at assess a legit coin, and obviously they're aware of the shit coins that exist as well. Many of those shit coins, as we say, they often are sort of moving quickly to exchanges because of liquidity, because they just want to get out and get that quick buck. What you're saying is something very different to that, Richard.
Yeah, I think we're way past the point of just having a white paper. It's actually amazing how far we've come. A year ago, we were able to raise significant amount just having a white paper and a promise. But I feel that a large part of that promise has been fulfilled, right? So we basically had a test net and now a pre-main net, right? Which effectively has the full suite of function of many competing mainnets out there, and yet we don't call it a mainnet. We have a large number of snapshot block producers, right, adding to the decentralization of the network. We have a large number of nodes, full nodes, like you said. We have these true use cases with GovCoins, and we have a true use case in decentralized exchange. And what else?
Well, there's
I just feel
so
like,
much. I mean, I agree
yeah,
with you. So what I'm alluding to is why not? Why aren't these exchanges really paying attention? Why does it have to be fee-based for them? If you're that
I
good,
see.
shouldn't they just acknowledge that and say, we're going to list you for free because you're not a shitcoin?
That is a great point, actually, Brad. Um, so exchanges are eager to list us, but correct, they don't want to do it for free. They still ask for a fee.
Mm.
I don't know if it's because either they look at the amount we've raised, right, and they feel that we can they think that at some point we're going to cave and just provide that chump change as they see it,
Right.
or it's
It
I
is
don't
what it
know.
is, it seems. But
Yeah,
let's talk
sure.
about that now. Obviously, as you alluded to, you're still having those conversations, and you've certainly sent the message that you are legitimate and you want to be here for the long term as a longitudinal, real deal project.
Right.
Are you confident that there are exchanges that will acknowledge that and that you will have a future with more listings?
I think so. I think ultimately our value will get recognized, and if enough people want to buy our coin, right, and want to be exposed to this coin, maybe discovering us through this DEX or through our GovCoin projects or other use cases, then that demand is there, then exchanges will list them, right? There are many other projects that aren't really shillers, right, that have gained reasonable respect within the community, such as
Right.
Zcash and Nano, and they just get listed, right? And I think there will also be community members that will try to push on our behalf, right? So if enough people tweet at CZ about listing our coin, and if they're legitimate,
Hint, hint.
Right, wink, wink, right? If they're legitimate community members, and if the cases are well argued, right? Then I think it will happen.
And I really appreciate this transparency in this discussion because I genuinely believe in this narrative of legit coins. I really do, beyond just that very maximalist approach. And at some point, surely those that are doing good, and you literally are with your own initiatives through Syracuse and beyond, they should be acknowledged, I would argue. Now, with regard to the complexities and the convolution that is crypto, we see wash trading rife, we see market making, we see everything. Does any of that concern you as you try to continue to exist in this space and build something that is legitimate?
Yeah. So I think it's funny. I don't know if you've been following Norio Rubini, right? One of his biggest
have. Yes, I have.
Space.
It's quite funny that he's paid so much to go and speak so antagonistically.
I see. Yeah, general, by the way, I'm a little skeptical when someone's argument is completely one-sided. It's almost like trying to establish a certain brand through consistency, even if at some point you realize that maybe out of 10 things you say, one thing isn't exactly logical, or you've been corrected a few times, but you're like, no, I got to stick with my narrative.
I mean, I'll say clearer for you. I do agree that there's a lot of arguments he puts forward that is just simply baseless. It's again a narrative of itself.
Right. Yeah. So yeah, I responded to him on Twitter, but I think but I do think there's legitimacy in pointing out there are unethical and illegal behaviors out there in the way things are being traded in the markets.
Exactly.
So I don't know. Hopefully, regulators will catch up. I don't think self-regulation is really the way to go, or at least it can happen way too long for way too many people to get scammed, right? Before this can come along. So
with the G7, sorry to interrupt, but this sort of relates, is the G7 have an alliance now. They would certainly concur because they're all trying to find ways to regulate this globally. And I think that's going to evolve. There's just a matter of time. We're seeing that already now with the series hearings with Facebook and Libra. But given this, and given that there's a lot of push even now from community, a lot of pressure to really support prices, support token values, does it ever concern you, this kind of pressure that you get from the speculative sort of angle as you're building out your project? Because you obviously still have to respect the token's value all the time.
I think if you're referring to the fact that certain illegal activities are taking place that support the value of their coins, whereas if we don't do such a thing, then we don't support the value of our coin.
Well, I mean, I'm not really sure Well,
Yeah.
Rich, is there, given your experience, is there are there different kinds of approaches? Because we are all aware that there's illicit practices going on, as you alluded to, wash trading, market making. But are there not ways where you as a business build out the support that's legitimate, through this?
So there is completely legal market making and ethical market making, right? The whole point of market making, the whole point of legitimate market making is in reducing slippage. That means if I really like a coin, I want to acquire it, right? I want to acquire it at this price. I don't want to buy it. I don't want to push up the price in the interim, right? Like, for example, let's say I want to buy something at $1, a coin, and I want to buy $10,000 of it. I don't want to execute my trade and find out, oh, I spent $1.50 while executing my trade. So basically what market makers do is that they reduce that slippage amount and make sure that you can buy that coin for exactly $1 and not $1.50. So I think that kind of behavior is completely ethical, and that's actually what's being done on stock market, completely being regulated. That's what these broker dealers on Wall Street are doing. And I think market makers that are doing that is doing a service to the project, to the investors, to the market, to the ecosystem. Beyond that, I think that there's gray areas and there's dark areas, and
there's no question of that, Rich. There's no question of that's happening. And once again, because you've always played this game from the utility perspective, you always want to build something blockchain geared to benefit people and also provide some sort of semblance of real business for the future. But it's just interesting to see how things are playing out right now, because we're certainly seeing a lot of coins that do have questionable conduct, that do have incredible performance, but do they have tech? Do they have a future? That's the big thing that I find challenging, because when I speak to so many legitimate teams, often the narrative comes back. The response is, this is a challenging space because of this.
Yeah. It is sort of messed up right now. I think, you have people that are legitimate, knowledgeable, that really want to invent something, and then you've got others that are taking advantage of that fact, right? And manipulating coin prices to their benefit. Unfortunately, I think before regulation kicks in, that's just going to continue to happen, right? Like I said, the self-regulation is not something that you can count on. But to be honest with you, for us, there's just way too much for us to do to pay attention to that kind of stuff, and it's also outside of our control. So rather than looking at a certain coin and criticizing how it has no tech and yet it's able to do X and Y, we just keep doing what we're doing. Just because I think to us that's the more accessible thing to do.
Right. Now let's move across to your utility token then, taking that sort of position of expansion and the likely correlation between expansion and increasing value. I think that's a fair point to make for something that is a utility token. Do you envisage long-term, in the best way you can possibly respond to this question, that the token itself is likely to reflect the growth, as you build out? Do you see what the question I mean is? I'm not asking you to comment on the price as a security, because it's not that. But I think that's something that is a fair question to pose.
I think so. I think I think for like, if we have faith in humanity, right? We have belief in long-term. If we believe in the Charlie Munger quote of how every day you get up, you put your left foot in front of your right foot, and then ultimately, and do you work hard, ultimately you'll get what you deserve. If we believe that, then the answer is yes, and I believe it. So that's all I can say.
Absolutely. Well, Richard Yan, it's been an absolute privilege. As always, I sincerely mean that, to speak with you. You are so transparent. You're so forward. You're one of the founders of the Vite network, a fast network. And perhaps, the big things that have come from this is the developments you've made with GovCoin, with real agencies, real governments trying to change the game for the good of people as well, but also that DEX. That's really hitting home on a service, on a technology that you're building on the blockchain, on that DAG, to really showcase what you can do in a decentralized way and enable other ecosystems like ERC20 projects or ERC20 tokens to really interoperate with business, with you, and really showcase what this technology can do for the real world. So thank you very much for your time. I wish you all the very best as you move now towards mainnet. That's really soon, around the corner for you. And that DEX, as you said, July 30, that's the big date to really unleash something that is another value add for Vite.
That's right. Thank you, Brad. I was about to have some kind of closing statement. I think you said everything for me. Which
No
leaves
worries,
nothing
mate.
for me except to say thank you for your time. Thank you for what you're doing for the industry.
And thank you very much. This is Brad Laurie from BlockVera signing off. But thank you again, Rich. And hopefully we can catch up again for more Vite updates as you build this legit coin for the future.
Thank you, sir.